Okay, looks like we're on all the streaming services. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Future in Space Hangout sponsored by the American Astronautical Society. Been a while, so it's good to be here. We've been a while since we've done one of these things, and today we are going to be talking about the Cislunar neighborhood. With or without Mr. Rogers, this is going to be cool. Where people are working hard to develop not only going to the moon and walking around, but also to develop the infrastructure and the stuff that's going to keep us there. And that's part of what we're going to talk about here today. I have three guests with me today joining in this discussion. They are Brett Alexander. He's the vice president, in no particular order, because this is just how I wrote it down. Brett Alexander, he's the vice president of government sales at Blue Origin. Just wave your hand there, Brett. There he is. George Pollock, he's the director of the Astrodynamics department at the Aerospace Corporation. Welcome, George. It's good to have you here. There you go.
Thank you very much.
And Ben Reed, co-founder CTO of Quantum Space, we're going to be talking with all of these people today. And I want to remind everybody how this works. We are streaming. This is a live stream out on social media. Go into YouTube. Two different channels, the American Astronautical Society's YouTube channel, which, by the way, if you have not subscribed to it, you need to get that way. Go there, push on the subscribe button, and watch, and you'll get notified of all the events that come forth in the coming months. Also, the Deep Astronomy YouTube channel, also on the Deep Astronomy Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, social media channels, and for the first time on deepastronomy.com/live. That's my website, and you can chat there via the Discord server. Live stream channel if you want to. I'm monitoring all those chats. They're coming here. So if you have a question for our guests or you want to make a comment to contribute to the conversation, please leave the chat in any of those streams. I will bring them up and I could possibly highlight them if you guys are nice. So you like right here. Oops. So you like right here. Here's Dennis. Or that's actually Captain Quinn. So welcome. Thank you, Peter. It's good to see you. And boy, you guys are chatting fast now. Okay, so and this is Dennis from long ago, from Twitch. I missed you guys too, man. I did. I missed you guys too. And thank you, Shahid, also for spreading some love on the UK. I appreciate that very much. Thank you for the help. Okay, so let me bring up George first. George Pollock is going to start us off talking a little bit about the what we're going to be kind of set the stage for us. About what we're going to be talking about a little bit today. So go ahead, George.
Sure. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today with these distinguished panelists and to hang out and talk about Cislunar. So as the director of the Astrodynamics department here at the Aerospace Corporation, it's a privilege for me to lead a talented team of folks who are looking at all number of space missions, including a growing set of interests in Cislunar space. So let me set the scene here. And if you would bring up the charts that I shared. Let's go on to chart 2. I'll sort of set the stage here and kind of get us into this mindset of what are we talking about? It's not just the lunar surface that we're talking about when we say cislunar. If you look it up in the dictionary, you'll find a definition that reads something along the lines of cislunar being between the Earth's surface and the moon's orbit. That's kind of an arbitrary boundary. So for purposes of our discussion today, we're going to think of it a little bit more broadly in the sense of the region of space where the motion of objects is dominated by the combined influence of the Earth and the moon's gravity. So the bulk of the action in that space is depicted here in a rotating frame view in this graphic, where we have the Earth as the blue dot in the middle. We've got the geosynchronous orbit altitude indicated there. About 10 times higher than geo is the lunar orbit altitude, and the moon is indicated there by the green dot. And in this rotating frame view, we can find some convenient handles on the real estate in this neighborhood, if you will. And these are the equilibrium points, or the so-called Lagrange points, numbered 1 through 5 in this view. And in an ideal model, you could put an object at these points and it would stay there. But in real life's a little messier than that. So you don't actually put objects at Lagrange points. You put them in quasi-periodic, roughly repeating orbits about them that are efficient to maintain. So in that sense, these 5 points are sort of addresses in the neighborhood where we could expect hotspots of future activity to emerge due to the availability of useful orbits in those vicinities. Let's go on to the next chart. Yes, I mentioned that the moon's altitude is about 10 times higher than GEO. Next chart, please.
Oh, I thought I did. Oh, I see what it's doing.
So
hang on.
We'll get
there
there.
we go. Oops, there we are.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So even though the moon is 10 times higher than GEO, it actually doesn't cost that much more to get out to these cislunar destinations in the vicinity of the moon. So here we have a plot of orbital energy on the vertical axis, and it really illustrates the depth of the Earth's gravity well compared to that of the moon. So it's kind of a steep climb to get out of Earth orbit. And by the time you get on a geosynchronous transfer orbit on your way to the geosynchronous orbit, you've invested most of the energy you would need to get on a translunar trajectory. So there's a tremendous, vast frontier of cislunar space that's available to a number of spacefaring actors today. At least a half a dozen nations can indigenously launch to GEO, and as indicated by this plot, beyond that to lunar and cislunar destinations. I also want to point out that the real estate in total volume at the GEO altitude and below is just 0.1% of the volume contained in a sphere of radius equal to the moon's orbital radius. So there's a tremendous amount of space out there and lots of opportunities, and also that brings with it some challenges. So let's go on to the next chart.
Well, hey, can I keep you here for just a sec? 'Cause I love this slide. So you just said that the GEO, the surface area of a sphere extending from this radius, has how much? 0.1% of the surface area as the
it's
moon's
a
orbit?
volumetric comparison that I was making. So the volume of space below the GEO altitude compared to the volume of space below the lunar orbit altitude is 1 to 1,000 ratio.
Oh, okay. So, and this really is a good example of just how much energy is required to get up to GEO. But if once you're there, there's not much to get you to, not much extra you got to put on your rocket to get you to.
Yeah. Now, to be clear, I'm not implying that one should stop off in GEO on their way to the moon. That would be a costly
No, I know.
But in terms of the capability of a launch vehicle fleet, the existing capabilities to insert things on transfers that go to GEO are pretty close within reach of sending smaller payloads out to translunar injection speeds that head out to the lunar vicinity.
Wow, that's a great slide. I appreciate that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right,
So
here's the fourth one.
Yeah, as we think about extending space operations, as NASA and a number of allies and partners, as well as other nations globally, are increasingly turning attention to flying missions out to the vicinity of the moon, and these missions are growing in number and complexity. The ecosystem that we enjoy today from LEO to GEO really is not immediately extensible. We can't just lean harder on our current capabilities and expect that we'll have the same capacity, the same quality of service as we venture more regularly beyond GEO. So things like space domain awareness, in terms of ensuring that we know where other objects are to make sure that we can operate safely in the presence of other operators, and that we understand the collision avoidance and conjunction assessment data and necessary to enable those safe operations. Position, navigation, and timing. How do we navigate our systems? A lot of commercial satellites and university payloads and so on in low Earth orbit today leverage GPS receivers. Well, GPS is predominantly focused towards the Earth, and yes, you can make use of that out to GEO and do some fancy filtering and such. But by and large, you're going to lose the quality of service that we have come to appreciate from LEO to GEO as we go beyond there, and we're going to need to think about how to get beyond this one-off owner-operator two-way ranging approach, so that we can really commoditize navigation support to these missions. Next, you think about communications. Of course, NASA has the terrific capability in the Deep Space Network with 3 sites around the globe to provide coverage for human, upcoming human missions as well as their interplanetary missions. But there's a limited capacity there. So as the number of operators grows, we're going to need to expand the capacity of that global communications network to provide access to these vehicles that are well beyond GEO. And then space mobility, space logistics. The previous chart really underscored that, yes, you're paying a high price to get to these destinations, and it's a bit more than getting to GEO. But once you get out there, actually, there's a rich set of mobility and maneuver opportunities because you can start to leverage the combined gravity influence of the Earth and the Moon, and you can go long distances for quite cheap propellant expenditure. So there's a whole new range of options that open. Usually those are not particularly fast trajectories, so you have to be patient, but you can get a lot of mass moved around in the areas depicted in this diagram at the right relatively efficiently once you get out there. A couple other areas of interest in the emerging cislunar ecosystem as we think about infrastructure needs include power for systems that we might in place on the surface, developing the capability to extract and utilize resources from the lunar surface, and pulling, for example, frozen water out of the regolith, human habitats. We've also got the perennial need to secure our systems from both natural hazards as well as potential nefarious actors, thinking cybersecurity and other security needs. And then as we increase the human presence beyond GEO, space weather is going to become an even more important service to share widely with all interested parties. We're going to need better forecasting and warning of significant space weather events so that human crew can take appropriate action and shelter if there's an energetic solar storm or something that could put them at risk. So those are a couple of themes that come to my mind when we talk about developing a smart cislunar neighborhood and extending this ecosystem from our current focus near Earth to the whole of the Earth-Moon system. And I'm pleased to be able to engage in this broader discussion and look forward to hearing from our colleagues on the panel.
Awesome. Okay, good. Cool. Thanks. So let's see. Ben, did you want to go next? Or was it? I'm sorry, Brett. We're going to do Brett next.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Oops. Hang on. Let me get my my new graphics set up here.
Well, so George did an excellent job talking about the cislunar space, particularly the Lagrange points. I'd like to hear more about that distant retrograde orbit that you mentioned, because I've heard about it, or that was on the chart, and I don't really understand it. So would like to come back to that. But from Blue Origin's perspective, we are focused on cislunar space in large part because we want to go to the lunar surface. And so a sustainable human presence on the moon, or what we call lunar permanence, is central to Blue Origin's vision. And let me explain what that means. Our vision at Blue Origin is millions of people living and working in space to benefit Earth. Earth is finite with limited resources, and if humanity is to continue to grow and flourish, we need to relieve the burden of energy and resources from Earth. And so this is an environmental imperative. And we believe that energy and that resource, those resources can be found in space. So while millions of people living and working in space is a few hundred years away, it depends on two fundamental gates, things that we need to work on right now. The first is low cost, safe access to space for people and stuff, right? Cargo, logistics, being able to get out there, but in particular for people, which is incredibly expensive, and from a safety standpoint is still a risky endeavor. So that's number one. And number two is how to access the abundant resources of space, how to get them, how to use them, and how to then be able to make them useful for both out in space, but back here on Earth. And so Blue Origin's mission is to develop that infrastructure to both access space routinely through reusable rockets and begin to access resources, starting with the moon. And the reason we're starting with the moon is only 3 days away, has abundant resources. So from our perspective, that's a logical place to begin. Mars, by contrast, is much harder to get to. The logistics are harder. The radiation environments are harder, making it vastly more expensive and complex to sustain. That's why we're focused on the moon, not Mars. So in partnership with NASA's Artemis program, we're developing a human landing system to return humans to the surface of the moon for the first time in more than 50 years. And you see an image of that system here that we were talking about last year. You see that here. And what you can see is not only the Blue Moon lunar lander, but you can see astronauts on the surface. And you can see a second lander in the background, which has delivered cargo and infrastructure needed for those extended stays on the surface. And of course, you can see the Earth in the background, noting how close to home this is. And so for us, sustainable means that the return to the moon is more than the flags and footprints demonstration of Apollo. It's more of a continuous cadence of missions over the long term. It includes living and working. It includes development of in situ resource utilization, the power and life-sustaining infrastructure that entails. And it includes all of the things that George mentioned as well, which is, space domain awareness and position navigation and timing and communications and all of those things that are needed in the cislunar space. All of that is eventually needed for Mars. But would be much more difficult to develop if we were only trying to do it at Mars instead of at the moon 3 days away. So from a Blue Origin perspective, the moon is very central to our vision, for our reason for being, to our mission of developing low cost, safe access to space for people and cargo, but also lunar landers like the Blue Moon lunar lander that you see here. So with that, I look forward to the conversation and questions. Thanks, Tony.
I can't tell you how happy I am to hear you say things like we need to get to the moon first, because I agree. I've always wondered, why the heck are we worried? I mean, going to Mars is great. I'm all for going to Mars. Let's go to Mars. But we've got to have more experience before we go there. And where better to get it than some place that's just a few 100,000 miles away than millions of miles away. And I think this is very exciting work, and I'm really glad to hear people are thinking along the lines of, let's get some stuff worked out on the moon first, because the knowledge we're going to get, the experience we're going to get, all of that's going to help us getting to Mars, but we're not even sure how long we can live outside of Earth's magnetosphere. I mean, we should get some idea about that first. And if things do go wrong, we can mitigate some of that by the closer distance. So, amen, brother, is all I got to say about that. So, all right. So, Ben, how you want to say a few words before we start some questioning?
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, based on where you are around the world. I'm going to share my screen here. It is mandatory that a PowerPoint must be displayed,
of course,
in every meeting. So I don't want to violate any protocols.
Yay, verily.
So lots of people living on the surface of the moon. That is fabulous. That is I would say that's a reach goal. That's aspirational. That's what we should be using, a big North Star vision to guide people. How do we actually make that happen? San Francisco didn't spring up overnight on the West Coast. First, there were a couple of scouts, then there were a couple of pioneers, and then an outpost was established. And that outpost allowed a base of operations from which activities could occur. You need Uber, you need Exxon, you need AT&T, you need your GPS working. I have no relationship to any of those companies, but we know what they all do. So we are working on the world's first lunar outpost. This outpost will be, if you remember the graphic, thanks for showing that, George, at Earth Moon L1, between the Earth and the Moon, as displayed here. That is what Quantum Space, the company that I am the CTO of, is developing. And this outpost is a multi-user, multi-mission, reconfigurable. You see the robotic arms there. Those robotic arms aren't just for good looks. there to actually do work. That is receive visiting vehicles. You see the visiting vehicle that's poised just above it, to reach out, capture that visiting vehicle, berth it, and then remove the cargo, put it on the outpost. The cargo that is on the outpost that is no longer needed, we pull that off, put it on the visiting vehicle, and now that becomes a trash barge to head off to a disposal orbit. So this is what we are working on at Quantum Space. And what good is an outpost if you aren't doing meaningful work there? So we are working on generating useful data and information for a variety of customers. Where are the lunar landers going to land? Are they going to land in a random spot? Are they going to land in a spot that's rich with frozen water ice in the regolith? Are they going to land where there are precious minerals in the regolith, on the ridge of a crater, in the bottom of the crater, in the middle of a sea? So doing lunar prospecting is data that we will be generating from our outpost, as well as generating data and information of that blue dot you see on the left side of the chart. Geosynchronous orbit is a great orbit. We've got a lot of weather satellites there, but you cannot see the poles of the Earth.
Oh, hang on, Ben. I hate to interrupt. I'm sorry, but we don't. We're still seeing the first slide.
Yeah.
Oh,
this
okay.
blue dot, Earth.
Oh, I'm sorry, that blue dot. I thought you were showing a graph. I apologize. Please forgive my apologies.
The pale blue dot upon which we all
Yes.
subsist.
Okay, I heard graph, and I'm like, okay.
You can't see the poles of the Earth from geosynchronous orbit. Of course, you can from polar orbit, but very, very close. You don't get the macro view of the poles from geo. From cislunar space, you get unique views of the Earth to complement all the imagery of the Earth that is taken from LEO, MEO, and GEO on Earth. Hosting test payloads, right? If we're going to live out at the moon for long periods of time, you mentioned the radiation environment a few minutes ago. How about a platform where we can test new processors, new algorithms on orbit? And when that testing is done, you pull the payload off and a new vehicle comes in. We put down a new experimental payload on the platform. Deploying satellites. You could imagine a satellite living in one of these boxes, and it's a tactical responsive space. So we keep it there until it's actually needed, and then it gets deployed to do whatever mission that it is intended to do. And then finally, logistics services, whether a vehicle needs to be refueled, maybe one day even repaired. I spent 22 years of my career at NASA, both with human servicing and robotic servicing. And it's not easy to fix a satellite with a robot, but we need to start somewhere in developing these fundamental capabilities if we're going to sustain Blue's vision and many other people's vision of a lot of people living on the surface of the moon. So civil applications, national security, commercial enterprise, we are developing our platform to be able to serve customers in all three areas. And with that, I'll turn it back over and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so Ben, how is this underway? Is this outpost? I mean, are these just concepts? Have you gotten contracts from anybody to actually build these things, or is this something Quantum Space is doing as a profit center for something down the road that you guys are going to build and make money from later, or is it something you're getting funding for now?
We are not building this for the U.S. government. This is a commercial enterprise being funded with commercial dollars. We are happy to take payloads and generate data for the U.S. government and other governments around the world. But this is not funded by government. This is commercial funding. This is a commercial enterprise. As I said, it is mixed use. So you can have, a Brazilian telescope sitting next to a U.S. government comm relay. All sorts of opportunities are possible here. But this is funded with private funding.
Can you give me some idea of the scale here? How big is this thing? Does it need to be built out in cislunar space, or can it be launched in one rocket? How big is this thing?
Yeah, great question. There is nothing on there for scale. That's a good point. So the visiting vehicle above is a propulsive ESPA class payload. So if you go out to the edges of the payloads, if you can you see my mouse?
Yeah, I can see it, but I don't know what ESPA is either.
5 meter fairing would be from here to here. Or you get a 5 meter sitting inside a 5 meter fairing would be here to here. So this thing is like, maybe 3 meters tall, something like that.
Oh, okay. And it could fit in, say, I don't know, an Ariane payload or something like that. Okay.
Falcon 9. Yeah.
Oh, Falcon 9, that's small. Okay.
Yeah. We're designing it to fit inside a Falcon 9.
Okay. All right. And so this one.
Or a ULA rocket. I'm not.
You're not gonna cut anybody out, right?
or Blue Origin New Glenn.
That's right.
Blue Origin. Yes, let's work together.
Okay. Well, I because I think in space telescope land, I just got to ask: is a possible use case for this? Because you have robotic arms, sounds like you could launch it with whatever vehicle is available, down to the Falcon 9 size. Can you use this to mitigate some of the space debris issues that we have, to maybe move satellites out of the way? And more importantly, can we maybe use it to go out to L2 and, if needed, work on JWST in the future? Is that the kind of use case maybe this could do as well?
Well, let me tell you this. The last 5 years of my time at Goddard Space Flight Center, which is where I was located, in the clean room right next to ours was JWST. So I have spent a lot of time adjacent to that program, both physically and metaphorically. JWST flew from this planet with decals, fiducials, high contrast stickers on the back end, so that when and if they run out of fuel, and they will run out of fuel one day, that is, they are at Sun Earth L2, 1 million miles away. But it is an unstable orbit, so they need some fuel to maintain their orbit. Right. Eventually, they will run out of fuel if NASA decides to refuel them. The fact that there are decals on the back end, and we took lots and lots of photos before it left of exactly where the wires are on the fuel valve and how the blankets were closed out, it is absolutely possible to refuel James Webb Space Telescope. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that this first platform would be the one to do it. I'm not suggesting that, but I will just mention that the low energy trajectory to get from Earth Moon L1, which is where our platform will be, and Sun Earth L2, extremely low energy trajectory. It is very doable to make that transition from one to the other. So this platform is not the right vehicle for that, but the second generation of this, or third, or something beyond this, absolutely could do that job.
Sorry, I'm very excited about that. That's awesome.
If you look over my shoulder, you can see the vehicle that I worked on for the first 12 years of my career.
That looks very hubular. That looks very hubular back there.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of servicing.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. So there you go, folks. That was a question we always worried about. Can anybody ever service JWST? The official answer is no. But who knows, right? That fiducials. I did not know they put little stickers on there to help to grab onto it. That's amazing. Okay, so let me see. We got a couple of questions in the chat. Let me get to those before I get to mine. Let's see. I wanted to go back here. Sorry, I'm scrolling. You're watching me scroll. Okay, this is from Anton on the AAS YouTube channel. Of the 3 existing NASA communication points, do I understand correctly that more points will need to be constructed to increase bandwidth? Is this a possible commercial development opportunity? Anybody want to take that one? Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, there's a company out there, and the name of the company is Intuitive Machines. Cool. And Intuitive Machines has established put baseband units in several commercial radio telescopes around the world. The thing with radio astronomy is they don't like to observe the sky when the moon's in the field of view because it's in the way. Well, guess what? That's the only time when those telescopes would want to communicate with something out in near the moon. And so this company has done something quite brilliant. They have partnered with them to set up an all-commercial global lunar communications network. I have no relationship with this company, but I will say that was a brilliant move, and I think it's a one step towards the commercialization of cislunar space. is establishing this commercial lunar network,
Awesome.
communications network.
I missed that G there. I'm sorry, I didn't read the G NASA, the G communications point. Okay, that's a good question. Thank you. And let's see. Just as a side note, he also wants to comment that Rockville resident here, Twin Book specifically, very excited to hear from Quantum Space. So yes, all right. And this is from Michelle. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong. What timeline are we talking? This is like the $64,000 question. What timeline are we talking about here? When can we possibly have some of this stuff? And let's start with you, George. What do you think?
Well, certainly the Artemis program is our flagship effort here as U.S. Moving back to the lunar surface with partners and allies. I think it's really remarkable, firstly, that NASA has now signed up 19 nations to the Artemis Accords, which are going to be vital in helping us to establish a framework to implement and interpret, if you will, the existing set of space policy and international laws and so on, as we work to make the economic opportunities there take root. So, in terms of getting humans back to the lunar surface, we're looking at later this decade. I'll defer to my NASA colleagues on the particular current best estimates there. But roughly the middle of the decade is when we'd expect Artemis 3 to return humans to the surface, and then in the next 10 to 15 years after that, we have an opportunity to continue to build momentum. I'm super excited personally to see the rich interest across the commercial sector with folks like Quantum and Blue Origin and others really not only exercising thought leadership, but really putting their money where their vision is and bending metal and preparing to field the systems and capabilities to offer the services that this ecosystem will require.
So, Brett, your company looks like Blue Origin looks like the closest thing I've seen so far to an actual moon base. What you showed us. Where are we on getting one of those?
Yeah, I think the moon base starts with people going back to the moon, and as George mentioned, Artemis 3 is supposed to land humans on the moon, and I think right now it's a 2025 timeline. And so looking beyond that, NASA has established a cadence of missions to the moon of once a year. And so if you assume that timeline holds, we're looking at late in the decade as we start to build out the infrastructure that allows extended stays on the moon, not just living in the lander that you come down in for 6 days or 20 days or something like that, but then longer stays with I think NASA has a program called Foundation Surface Hab. There's power that's needed. There's all sorts of other logistics and infrastructure. So as we increase that cadence of missions to the moon, that's when a base, I'm not sure that's the right term, but an outpost or a base really begins to take shape. So late this decade and early next decade.
This lander looks pretty big to me, and I mean, how many people can it hold, and for how long?
Well, so NASA's looking at 4 people on the surface for an extended stay up to 30 days. So you're looking at a capability that is far beyond Apollo. It also is going to go to the gateway, the lunar gateway that NASA has in this near rectilinear halo orbit, NRHO orbit, near the moon. So it needs quite a bit more propulsion also than the Apollo lander to get down to the surface and back. But it is for shorter stays than what a moon base really would be for. It really is to shuttle people back and forth from orbit.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you brought up Gateway, because how do all of you guys' work? Does it have anything at all to do with that? Are you guys doing things independently of the Gateway? I know you're not part of the Gateway project, and so you probably can't speak on its behalf. I'm not expecting you to. I just want to know, do you guys fit in with that in any way?
Absolutely. So NASA has said that they are going to be taking, under Artemis, they're going to be taking astronauts to the Gateway. And so for our lunar lander to take them down to the surface, we will be docking with the Gateway.
Okay. So
that's not berthing, that's docking, and so we will be taking logistics there as well that go down to the surface as well. So the Gateway is a central node in NASA's Artemis program, and we will definitely be able to interact with it and dock to it and transfer people to and from it.
Okay. I'm gonna ask this question, and I expect a lot of I don't worry if you don't want to answer. Just say you don't want to answer. But we're talking about Artemis a lot, and Artemis has had a lot of problems. Not only is it delayed for years and years, but it's also way over budget. How confident are you in this platform getting us to the moon? Scale of 1 to 10, or just say I'm confident, I'm not confident. I know that there's a lot of trouble that can be gotten into here, but I would like to know what you think about the Artemis platform to get us to the moon. We'll start with you, Ben.
Sure. Yeah. I'd probably give it a 10 out of 10, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah. Wow.
I'll tell you why. There is a built-in cancellation insurance technique into the program. No program at NASA is insurance proof, right? NASA is dependent upon allocate appropriated funds every year. And if those funds aren't appropriated, well, then NASA won't do anything. But there is built-in cancellation insurance, and that is the deep involvement of international partners. And when you've got international partners involved and they are spending their funds in those countries to participate, and ESA is spending a lot, JAXA is spending, Canada, as well as the many companies that were mentioned that are part of the Artemis Accords, which are slightly different than Artemis partners. That is makes it very difficult for future Congress to not appropriate funds to the program. Will it be the most efficient, the most effective? People always gripe about how much things cost, but you know what? Space is hard. And so I think Gateway is going to happen. I can't predict the month or the year that it's gonna get up there. But it's a well thought through program that I think will do wonderful things. People griped about ISS, and now we've had humans living on it continuously for the last 22 years.
Yeah.
I think Gateway, when it's in our rearview mirror, we'll say, yeah, of course we did it. It's just not in the rearview mirror yet.
Yeah, well, that's good. I'm glad. I agree with you. Gateway's early on, though. I was talking about Artemis, the platform that get us to the moon. What do you think of that? Because that's not cheap. That's not cheap. You're equally confident that it'll get us to the moon. Okay.
Well, I am, and I'll tell you why. Is national pride, right? There is a non-trivial aspect to large rockets and humans and humans in space that is directly tied to national pride and prestige. And if the United States wants to remain a leader in space, it's going to do so by, there's the saying, he who shows up first gets to make the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are not going to sit back and not put humans in cislunar space and then gripe when another country does and they're doing it wrong or not doing it responsibly. So for that reason, I can't imagine that a future Congress would not want to lead by example. So that's my view of what's going to happen.
Okay. No, thank you, Ben, for answering the question. You can also pass if I ask you anything you don't want to talk about. George, you got a comment, or do you want to? What do you think about Artemis, the platform, the rocket?
Yeah, well, I'm not close enough to have an informed technical opinion on the likelihood of success. I'd say it's super exciting as an American to see the culmination of this development program, and going to be tuned in with rapt attention, not only with SLS flight number 1 with Artemis 1 coming up, hopefully later this year, but also the capstone mission that our friends over at Rocket Lab are going to fly with their payload partners from Advanced Space and TIVAC systems. So that's going to be the trailblazer, really, that tries out the near rectilinear halo orbit that Brett mentioned is where the Gateway will be based in the coming years. So that's going to be a really important mission, and they're using a really cool trajectory to get into that orbit, flying out about 1.5 million kilometers from the Earth on their way there. So I'm excited for that.
Well, thank you. And Brett, do you have any comments on it? Yeah, there's any pause, any concerns for the delays, the wet dress rehearsal, all of that stuff being delayed, any of that
No,
cause you
I think
pause?
those are all normal, and I think NASA is approaching that first launch of SLS and Orion and Artemis, and they have to do it carefully. So I'm confident that it'll work. NASA does hard things very well, given time and resources. We saw that with James Webb. James Webb took a long time, cost a lot of money, but it is working flawlessly. And I'm confident that SLS and Orion will as well. What concerns me over the longer term, though, is that cadence of missions. When do we get to the surface? How well do we sustain those missions before trying to move on to Mars, or just lose political will to keep going back and to really
Right.
develop that lunar surface?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so when I go to the American Astronautical Society meetings, workshops, the last one I went to was in Alabama, and there was a woman from NASA speaking there. I can't recall her name right now, but she made the important point that NASA is in the mood, or is in the mode of wanting to start a space economy, and in order to get that space economy started, they wanted to be more of a customer than a person who drives the bus, so to speak. How important, and it was certainly important to some companies as they grew, like SpaceX, etc. How important is NASA's role as a customer to you guys as companies? Do you guys need NASA to be a big customer for you, or are you planning on going forth and making money on space without them? I guess I have to pick somebody. Ben, can you go?
Sure. Is NASA an important customer? Absolutely. Artemis, the Artemis program is what is driving all the economic activity for it. I believe in the preamble for this hangout. What were the numbers in there? Something like 6 billion is being invested, or 10 billion by 60 countries. I forget what the numbers were, but it's a big number and a big number of countries and dollars that have planned missions to go to the moon in the next 10 years. NASA in the United States is at the heart of that. So are they important to the cislunar economy and the lunar economy? Absolutely they are. But I think companies whose only source of revenue is to get NASA contracts oftentimes do well. That happens not to be what my company is planning on doing. We are mixed with U.S. government civil, NASA, NOAA, USGS, as well as international civil, national security, and commercial. So we are going for a very broad diversity of revenue streams, both domestic and international, so that if NASA does have a slow year with its budget or a change in plans, that the house of cards doesn't come crashing in.
Yeah, George, what about Aerospace Corp?
Yeah, so if you're not familiar with the Aerospace Corporation, we're a California-based nonprofit, and we operate a federally funded research and development center with heavy emphasis on the national security space enterprise. But we also have as a major customer NASA, as well as other agencies like NOAA. So we act as a technical advisor in spanning the entire space enterprise for the nation, and in that sense, our mainline work is ensuring our customers' mission success and working with the partners in industry to bring about these capabilities. And not only does that include the traditional prime contractor systems integrators, but it increasingly now includes helping the government customers reach out into and tap into the velocity and the commercial innovation that we see in the burgeoning commercial and new space sectors.
Brett, do you have any comments on that? How important is NASA to you as a customer?
I think the most important thing, number one, is U.S. leadership, right? U.S. leadership and NASA exercises on behalf of the U.S. government that leadership, and so it's very important. But U.S. leadership is important both from a geopolitical standpoint, but also a legal standpoint, and to allow that economic activity to develop in a way that is free market and with rules of the road that, for example, that the Artemis Accords in those 19 countries have all agreed to. So it's absolutely vital that NASA lead. It's also good for NASA to be a customer. They are a major customer. They are an important customer. And whether you as a company are more or less reliant on NASA as a customer, it's most important that NASA is going out there and doing these things so that you can fit into that framework and you have a framework around you that allows that commercial activity to flourish.
But it's not required, though, is it, Brad? I mean, if NASA didn't lead, that's pretty much a political leadership, because Congress sort of seems to dictate anyway how much money what it can do by giving it the money that it gives it. That's not required, though, is it? I mean, one could easily imagine a company just doing what they want to do anyway, right? Without any of this leadership and taking the lead on their own. Is that really a possibility without NASA, or do you see where I'm getting with this? I think it's possible that a company could just decide, you know what, we're going to the moon, we're doing this, that, and the other thing, and we're just going to do it. What's to stop someone from doing that?
There's nothing to stop someone from doing that, and I think it's certainly possible that isolated activities would happen in that fashion. But I think what you are trying to develop is an ecosystem that's not one company, that's not one nation, but it's an ecosystem of a lot of activities. And so if you think of it in terms of a terrestrial enterprise that depends on a lot of infrastructure, those pieces of infrastructure all have rules of the road and guidelines and how things operate. And that's what sustains enterprise. So a company going out by itself without customers, without the government backing, without a framework, without an ecosystem that develops alongside of it, is going to have a much harder time. So it's certainly possible to do that. But there is a role for government. There's a role for U.S. leadership. There's certainly a role for NASA as a prime customer and a leader in that area.
Okay, good. That's
Precisely, Brett. And I would put a finer point on that remark to say that I think it's time that we have a clearer construct for a cislunar master planning function to drive toward that coherence, that synchronization that's going to be necessary to maximize the mutual benefit of all these investments and activities. How do we go from a disparate set of commercial investors and ideas and visions to realize the full potential of an interoperable, sustainable, and scalable cislunar infrastructure and ecosystem that allows the U.S. To continue a technological leadership role, but also to bring along with it our partners and allies, so that we can really lead the way with Western democratic ideals that we want to see extend into this frontier of cislunar space.
Well, I hope you're right. I mean, I think that's important too, and I hope it works out that way. But I think one of you said earlier in this hangout that who gets there first, gets to call a lot of the shots. And so I worry about some kind of land grab or space grab, I guess, at this point, where everybody's staking their claims because they're there and they can. And there's really, because of the economics of space now, the way it's worked out in terms of both costs getting there and operating there, that's all coming down in a rather rapid rate. And so I just wonder what you guys are thinking about that, and what role NASA would have to be as a customer to be able to make that happen. And it sounds like all of you are pretty heavily invested in the idea that NASA is going to be involved in some big way. So that should help drive the bus a little bit. So I'm going to also read John's question, and I'm gonna also modify it just a bit to include something else. But can you see cooperation not only with NASA, but between each of your companies and with others, such as SpaceX or Virgin Galactic? Are you guys thinking about this? Are you guys thinking about all the other players and working together, or is it really capitalism and we're a company and we're gonna go until we survival of the fittest kind of thing? How are you guys thinking about working with other companies?
Well, I can take a first hack at it. Space is hard. Space is crazy hard, and for one company to do everything has never been done. Blue Origin is a fabulous rocket company that is also doing other things like landers, but they are not doing all things in space. They are not launching GPS satellites. They are not developing new detectors for reconnaissance for the national security, not to my knowledge. My company is doing lots of things with our platform, multi-use, multi-mission, but we're not developing rockets. And so it's nearly impossible to be a 100% vertically integrated company and not be dependent upon supply chain partners, adjacent companies to be successful.
Oh, that's true.
I do not want to speak for Blue, but from being in this business for a couple of years, that's my observation. And I will say NASA recognizes. I realize your question wasn't about NASA in that context, but I'll volunteer very quickly that NASA with the CLIPS program, NASA could have said we're going to buy rockets and we're going to land landers on the moon and we're going to do science experiments there, but they didn't. They opened up a contract and they said, hey, commercial companies, you develop a lander. We want to be hosted on your lander, and you are responsible for making all that happen. We just want to ride to the surface of the moon, and here's some money to do it. And so that, invigorates innovation for all these companies to come up with different ways of solving that hard problem. So NASA realizes that they're not the only game in town, and I don't think any company does either. You got to be a good neighbor if you're going to survive in this business. Is my opinion.
Okay.
I would add from a Blue Origin perspective, we're part of the U.S. industry. We cooperate with other companies already. For example, we're a merchant supplier of engines. We're selling the BE-4 engine to United Launch Alliance for their next rocket, the Vulcan rocket. That's replacing the Russian-made RD-180 engine. We've in the past with our lunar lander system for our human landing system program with NASA. We had a national team that had Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and Draper on it. So we have already demonstrated that we are more than willing to cooperate with other companies where there's a mutual benefit and where there's those sorts of overlapping skills. So I would not rule out any form of cooperation going forward.
But I just want to point out, we are talking about infrastructure here, and that is huge, right? If you lay the railroad tracks, then the other railroads need to use your tracks. And so this is something that I think this is an important time in the space industry, whether if you set up outposts, like what Quantum Space is talking about, and landers, things like this, all of these things are become the skeleton of what will happen when we start using this space as both a destination and a place to make money. So this is interesting times. I'll be really interested to see how it plays out. And I agree that I think NASA's doing the right thing. I think that by saying, look, you build the rockets, we just want to buy a ticket on them, is the right way to go. I think that is really a good use of NASA resources, because they can drive the bus, at least initially, by saying, here's what we're going to require. If we're going to ride on your rocket, we require the following things. We want it to be safe and all of these other things. And so you have all these constraints to work under. So that's really an important part of it too, I think. Okay. Let's see. Here's from Jimmy Nova. Let me ask this question because it's related to each of your own individual work, what you're doing. Of the things that you're doing, what do you worry about? What's keeping you up at night? What stresses do you have? This is a therapy question. This is a chance for you to get it out. Nope, it's just us. Nobody will listen. It'll just be us. Go ahead, George. Start. What keeps you up at night?
Sure. So as we think about sending humans back beyond low Earth orbit for the first time in decades, the ability to deal with contingency scenarios and abort scenarios is one of those things that comes foremost in my mind. We don't really have mature search and rescue and astronaut recovery capabilities. So that leads us back to the tremendous attention to mission assurance and rigor before launches, and why we're seeing such a deliberate approach with NASA and their SLS flight preps. But as we aim to expand these activities and send more and more people, we're going to need something akin to the Coast Guard to go rescue people if they get stranded out there.
Okay, Brett, anything keeping you up? You cool?
Well, really continuity of purpose from a U.S. government perspective keeps me up at night.
That was a problem with ISS. I'm sorry, but it was.
It was, and fortunately they stuck that through.
Yeah.
In my 30 years in the business, this is the third time NASA's going back to the moon. The other 2 times didn't work. And so sustaining this, not only through that first landing, but through a cadence of activity that allows that ecosystem to grow, and it's sustainable, and it flourishes and gets bigger, is the real challenge. I believe we're going back this time. I think NASA's on the right path. They've got a good program. They've got a good plan. I want to see what comes next. And I want to make sure that what comes next really allows that ecosystem to grow.
I couldn't agree more. That's good. Okay. Ben, do you have anything? Do you want to add?
Yeah.
You're sleeping fine, right?
I'm going to jump on that bandwagon.
Okay.
Sustained government attention, funding, getting the missions off the ground, keeping things going. And it's tough. NASA's got a lot of irons in the fire, right? They got James Webb off the ground while ramping up Artemis. How many countries can say that?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Right?
Amen, brother.
Right. They build every weather satellite for the civil government that's ever been flown here in the United States while developing James Webb and getting Artemis off the ground, while also doing aeronautics research. So they have got a lot of irons in the fire, and it's difficult to deprioritize any of them for the priority of Artemis. So tough calls are going to need to be made for that continuity of purpose, for that continuance, that sustained funding. But it's important for companies like mine, quite frankly, to see that messaging, to let our investors know this is going to happen. It's not going to be delayed 10 years. It's not going to be canceled.
Yeah, that's an important point. Thank you. Okay, this is from Nick. I think this is to you, George. This is from Nick Nuri. What are some of the most pressing challenges the Astrodynamics group is trying to solve related to cislunar space at the Aerospace Corporation?
Yeah, so a couple of themes come to mind. Space domain awareness that I mentioned earlier. There's just a tremendous amount of volume there. So we're supporting many of our national security space customers in thinking about that problem set. How do we keep tabs on things that are out there and understand their orbits so that we can project the trajectories into the future and ensure safe operations. Even on Monday this week, Lieutenant General Whiting from Space Operations Command said that U.S. military will likely have to pay more attention to what's happening beyond GEO. So space domain awareness is clearly on his mind as well, beyond GEO and the cislunar regime. And the abort scenarios that I mentioned earlier, a lot of the trajectory planning capabilities for multi-body dynamics to date have been exquisite point solutions that have been optimized to either minimize time of flight or minimize fuel. But how do you get astronauts back right now if something goes sideways and you don't have the time to wait for the ideal alignment of the Earth, the moon, and the spacecraft to make that injection burn to bring them back? And so there's active research that my team is daily engaged in along those lines, working with global leaders like Kathleen Howell at Purdue University.
Cool. Okay, we're running out of time, so I want to get to Anton's question. I think it's probably to you, Ben. When do you see conversations around cislunar space becoming regular talking points with Congress? Will private companies like Quantum Space help guide any policy decisions?
Sure. We make our positions known to our delegation here in Maryland. I don't think it will ever be a regular talking point within Congress unless something really goes sideways, as George has alluded, and knock on wood, hopefully it never does. If you think about what the Space Force is interested in, they've got like their top 10 areas that they are monitoring or they are actively operational missions. Cislunar Space is not one of their top 10. It's important. It's super important to my company. It's important to Blue Origin. But in terms of all the activity happening in space, unless something really goes sideways, I can't imagine other than, hey, we just landed on the moon. And, people pay attention to that for a few months. I don't know that it will ever dominate over activities in LEO and GEO, to be honest. I don't know. So just being realistic.
Well, I know I think Blue Origin, correct me if I'm wrong, Brett, but you do some policy stuff too, right? You guys have people in Washington as well, right?
Absolutely. We talk to Congress all the time, just like we talk to NASA. And I can tell you there are pockets within Congress that are very interested in cislunar space that we talk with them about it on both the Space Force side and the NASA side. And so there are folks there that understand the issues and understand the implications. And so I don't know that it's going to be a general topic for all of Congress, but certainly those committees and staff that deal with those issues are up to speed and really understand the implications for both the cislunar economy, but also the geopolitical discussions.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to have to stop us here because we're out of time. It's 4 o'clock and I need to let my guests go. But I want to thank you all so much for watching our Future in Space Hangout. This is brought by the American Astronautical Society. Astronautical.org is their website. Please consider becoming a member. They bring these to you. We try to do them every month. And so there should be another one coming up in June. If you just follow all of our channels, the American Astronautical Society website, as well as YouTube channel and this YouTube channel, you'll get notifications on when we set them up because I post the events as soon as we finalize them. I want to thank our guests so much. This has been a lot of fun. This is Ben Reed from he's a co-founder and CTO of Quantum Space. Also George Pollock. He's the director of the Astrodynamics department. That is a cool business card to have. Astrodynamics department director. Aerospace Corporation. Brett Alexander. He's the vice president of government sales at Blue Origin. Thank you all so much for taking time out to be with us. And I hope you'll consider coming back because we got a lot of stuff happening with the moon, right? The moon.
Absolutely.
Going back to the moon, folks.
Sounds good.
That's what I want to see. So the next big milestone, I guess, is the Artemis wet dress rehearsal. That sounds weird, but that is what they're trying to do. That's where they try to go all the way up to launch. Hopefully it's going to happen this summer. And then that'll pave the way for the first Artemis 1 launch later this year. And then we're going to the moon. So thank you all so much for watching. And as always, keep looking up.